What happens when insurance companies fight each other over $1 million plus claims? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Joel. This is Mark. Welcome to the Williams Elleby Howard Easter YouTube channel, where we talk about all kinds of things involving personal injury and personal injury claims and lawsuits, and insurance is a vital part of those type claims. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And really what we're focusing on today is large claims, because insurance companies sometimes get into it when you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars. You don't see them fighting each other as much when you're talking about, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. So, Mark, to get into this conversation, what do you think about when I say, hey, these insurance companies are fighting each other over the settlement and who's paying this in this claim?
Well, one of the first things I think about is how likely is it get to the next layer of insurance. Mm-hmm. And what people don't often know is that somebody who has caused injury to another person might have multiple policies, and they might be different amounts. Someone might have what's called a self-insured retention, where they're paying it out of their own pocket up to a certain amount, but then there's insurance on top of that. And everyone doesn't want to pay money, and so they fight each other about it.
And usually you've probably heard about these extra layers of insurance, and they're sometimes called umbrella policies or excess policies, things like that. Large companies, even high net worth individuals, will oftentimes have what we call a primary policy, and that's going to cover up to a certain amount. Let's just say it'll cover up to the first $1 million of damages. And then lots of times there'll be an excess policy on top of that, because the excess policy is usually cheaper dollar for dollar for the insured to obtain. So you might have a situation where there's one insurance company has the first $1 million, a different insurance company has the next $3 million, and then maybe even another insurance company has the next 10 or 20 or 50 million on top of that. And those top tier, like high dollar insurance claims are for catastrophic events. And usually in those catastrophic events, that's when you're going to see people fighting each other. So what I want to talk about now is, as the injured person who's been hurt really bad, who's got $1 million plus of damages, how do you get the insurance companies fighting each other about who's going to pay you? Because that's a good situation to be in. Like, who's going to pay me, not whether they're going to pay me.
Exactly. And it depends on what state you're in, because the state laws differ about what the rights are of the different insurance companies. Georgia happens to be a pretty good state for this. And in Georgia, for instance, if an insurance company doesn't pay a claim and a trial verdict is more than the amount of insurance, the person who bought the policy can sue their own insurance company to, sometimes called bad faith or negligent claims handling, say, hey, I don't want to pay it out of my own pocket, you've got to pay it. Well, the same thing applies with these multiple layers of insurance. And the excess carrier, the one that's, let's say, over the first $1 million, could sue the lower primary insurance carrier and say, hey, you could have settled this for $1 million, and now you've exposed our assets, we're coming after you, you pay it, so we don't.
Yep. And the key there is that the injured person has to give the first layer of insurance, the one that's $1 million or less, an opportunity to settle the case within those limits. Because what happens is, when you do that, the insured, or the person that bought the policy, is probably, if your damages are more than $1 million, they're going to be putting pressure on their liability carrier to pay the $1 million to protect themselves. But also, if the damages are $10 million, that excess umbrella policy is going to put pressure on the first $1 million carrier to say, hey, look, you need to settle this. We got $9 million at stake right now.
Exactly. And one of the things we do often is, if we know there's excess insurance, we'll send a letter to the primary carrier, but we'll make sure to copy the excess carrier. And we'll say, hey, primary carrier, you've got $1 million insurance, we'll give you 30 days, you pay it, and then the case is over. Then we notify the excess carrier, and if they're paying attention, they can start putting a lot of pressure to settle that case for the $1 million. If they don't settle it for the $1 million, then it becomes a fight between them to see who might pay an excess verdict.
That's right. And it really is all determined by what the claimant or the plaintiff is willing to do, and the risk that they're willing to take to set it up, to set the claim up, so that they might be able to get the insurance companies fighting with each other. And, unfortunately, lots of times, in order to make that happen, a demand has to be made for maybe less than what the actual damages are. But if the liability carrier doesn't pay it, you could be in a really good spot to try to get the insurance companies fighting with each other about who's going to pay how much, and not focusing so much on whether they have to pay you to begin with. So that pretty much sums it up. You're going to run into these things with catastrophic injury cases sometimes. Hopefully, if you have catastrophic injuries where your damages could be into the millions and millions of dollars, you've reached out to an attorney, because insurance companies are surely going to fight you harder over those cases than they are over one where you may have $5,000.
That's right. And the bottom line is no one wants to be on the hook for paying that money, so they might fight each other pretty hard to see who's gonna write the check at the end of the day.
Yeah, and there's been many a cases where there's a verdict or a settlement, and the case with the injured person is done, but then the litigation between the insurance companies goes on for years and years and years, and it just seemingly never ends until lawyers make a lot of money, and the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court of whatever state it's in have weighed in for a final decision. So, but long story short, if you have a catastrophic damage case, make sure you reach out to a lawyer. We obviously handle those, but just get a lawyer in your state that's well versed in insurance coverage law, so they know the ins and outs of how all this works. Not only can they handle your claim and know how to manage your case through litigation, but they also know what's going on the back end with the insurance companies, because that can have a tremendous effect on the ultimate number that you're offered in the case.
That's exactly right. And just as an aside, when I was a defense lawyer, I sometimes was representing those excess carriers, and we would have to make those calls to the primary carrier to kind of say, hey, pay up.
Yeah.
So I do know you got to have somebody who knows what goes on behind the scenes and knows the pressure that these insurance carriers are under to make sure that they don't get exposed to an excess verdict.
That's right. That's right. It's not always send a letter, get money. It's not always file a lawsuit, get money. It's not always go try a case, get money. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and if you want to put yourself in the best position to maximize your recovery, you want to make sure you have a lawyer that knows the ins and outs of the front end and the back end of how insurance claims work. But we hope this video has been helpful to you. If so, give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, we will see you next week for more personal injury videos. As personal injury lawyers, we love what we do, and we're happy to share the experience that we've gained in personal injury law. To help our family, friends, and YouTube subscribers, we've shared over 300 personal injury videos covering various injury topics. So if you'd like to gain more knowledge that may help protect yourself or a loved one when they're on the roads or out in public, check out our channel or view our playlist of shorts for quick personal injury tips.